In part 2 of this one-part series, we looked in general at the poorly titled PragerU video, What's a Greater Leap of Faith, God or the Multiverse? In this video, we're going to get into the specifics because avoiding the specifics is one of the main ways religious folks argue their various points and try to seem reasonable when they are anything but. Our PragerU scientist, Brian Keating, formerly of the Keating 5, I believe, begins by saying that those who have a religious faith have an answer for how the universe came to be, while atheists do not. And their answer is, can you guess? Yep, it's God. As detailed in my previous video, this answer, God, is simply an admission of believing in magic and a magical being who can do anything. And he can do that anything in ways that we cannot comprehend or explain. But how then is God an answer to our science friend Brian when that answer is neither comprehensible nor able to give us any real explanation of just how exactly everything came to be? The video makes me think that if Dr. Brian had been born Isaac Newton back in 1642 or 43, depending on which calendar you prefer, we would still be without a theory of gravity. Dr. Bri would have simply said that God was causing everything to fall to the earth, and that would be it. Instead, Newton actually did that difficult, bothersome, hard, worky, sciencey kind of stuff and formulated an actual answer. One that can be demonstrated and repeated. One that gives us actionable knowledge which enables us to harness the power of that knowledge to do all kinds of things which benefit us. From structural engineering to landing a man on the moon. Saying you believe in magic and a magical being is no answer at all. We literally know nothing more about how everything came to be by saying that God did it. In what way exactly is knowing nothing more an answer, Dr. Bri? God is not an answer. God is nothing but a placeholder for all the information which is missing. Bri, the other Bri, doesn't seem to know the difference between an answer and an hypothesis. And he really should if he wants to be taken as a credible scientist. Not that there's any money in that among the faithful. Sorry, name bro. The truth is, and Dr. Bri doesn't really want you to know this or be associated with it, but believers in the God of Abraham do have an explanation that goes beyond God did it. They have a very detailed explanation of how the universe came to be, and that detailed explanation is contained in the very first few chapters of their holy book. It's important to note that this detailed explanation came from the very same people from whom Dr. Bri got his concept of God did it in the first place. Among other things, this detailed explanation tells us that the universe is a very recent creation which came together over a period of 6 days. This highly detailed God did it explanation, as outlined in the book of Genesis, also tells us that man is a very recent creation and that death itself is something very new to this world. It says that the earth does not move, but rather has a rotating firmament, which circles the earth, holding the stars and the planets affixed in their places. This is the explanation Christendom was clinging to while Galileo was muttering before the Inquisition under his breath, and yet it moves. This is the detailed explanation some religious people living today, Ken Ham, Kent Hovind, and other people whose names begin with the letters K-E-N, still cling to right this minute. This explanation was the explanation of those who believed that God did it for thousands of years. And it was the explanation said to be given by the very God who supposedly did it. It was taken so seriously and literally that even the greatest mind ever to walk the earth, Sir Isaac Newton, used this explanation to calculate exactly when creation took place, 4004 BCE. In the 17th century, Bishop James Ussher used this explanation to calculate the exact day of creation, October 23rd, 4004 BCE, in the Julian calendar. It turns out he was off by at least a couple hours. I suspect Dr. Bri, like most modern believers, rejects this detailed biblical explanation of how the universe came to be as found in Genesis. And I suspect he rejects it because the evidence scientists have gathered over the last 400 years demonstrates that the earth and man and death are not recent creations. We know that the earth moves and that there's no such thing as the firmament. Dr. Bri says God did it, but in all likelihood, does not believe the account provided by his very own holy book as to how or when God did it, and all because of science. God did not reveal that to us. We figured that out on our own. The explanation of how provided in Genesis is now said to be a metaphor by folks like Dr. Bri, and something not to be taken literally or even seriously. Of course, it wasn't a metaphor for thousands of years. Again, believers took it so literally and so seriously that they killed people for doubting it. So much for an all-loving God who just left the question of this explanation's metaphorical nature hanging out there, knowing precisely the suffering and injustice it would cause. Had there been a magical being who created the universe, this magical, fantastical account of a six-day creation, as outlined in the book of Genesis, would be a perfect fit. That account makes perfect sense for a being who can simply snap his fingers and make universe-sized shit happen. For believers, that detailed explanation in Genesis, it was supposed to be evidence of the divine connection these Bronze Age morons claim to have with this supposedly magical being. Now it's simply evidence of a serious drug problem among these desert dwellers. Had we discovered that the universe was in fact very young, oh Lord, we would never hear the end of it. Not from these folks. But when the evidence goes the other way, hey, never mind, all right? Okay, it means nothing. I mean, it's a metaphor. We didn't get anything wrong. Look, hey, heads I win, tails you lose. These believers believe that God explained in great detail to the prophet Moses exactly how he created the universe, but now reject that explanation only after science has demonstrated otherwise. And still, they want us to believe in the explainer who got it wrong. That's not a leap, my friends. That's a free fall. As for atheists like myself not having an answer about the universe and how it came to be, it must be pointed out that not having an answer doesn't mean some other evidence-free hypothesis is correct. Nor does it mean that I should leap to some magical conclusion. 42 is every bit the explanation that God is. I even have overwhelming evidence for the existence of 42. But I reject that answer as well, because an answer which explains nothing is not an answer. It's a leap. I would hope that a scientist like Dr. Bri would understand that, but there is not a lot of understanding going on there at PragerU. Their curriculum is now made up almost exclusively of leaping and bounding, as they train in earnest for the 2018 mental gymnastics. Go Devils!